For this episode of the Máquina series, so this is going to be voiceover of a bunch of videos condensed into one. Our formal footage of training video-wise with this series has kind of come to an end. Certainly not an end to training, but the way we were able to capture it in a more controlled environment, filmed formally with the guys with the cameras, we were able to show you a lot of the foundation stuff, some of the formal introduction stuff, which would be intro to gunfire, intro to the pointing. When I say that, we didn't teach her to point, we just simply documented her pointing. If you haven't seen it, I'd go back and watch it. What we're missing is the part that happened when we went from the training stuff that was formal to the hunting stuff that was wild birds. And so I filmed a lot of it with my phone, carrying my phone in the woods. This episode is going to be condensing a whole bunch of that. So as I go through these videos, that's the sequential order. So August 7th to September 13th. In 5 weeks, I had her in the field close to probably 8 to 10 times, 2-3 hour walks, finding woodcock, finding some grouse birds. I'm gonna watch this. I'm gonna talk you through the actual things that I'm seeing and explain to you a little bit more in detail. I don't talk much at all, if any, on the video. So it's all going to be done in voiceover. So this is from August 7th. This is her working a cover that I know there's birds in. And we're actually going on our way back to bait the bear. I have a bear bait back in here. So she got a little birdie. So I took my phone out. I started filming. And you can just tell by the pace. She's slowed way down. She's really working some bird scent. Probably a bird on the trail. Yeah. Most of these videos I have my labs with as well. They just simply healed with us, and we did that all training season. That first video, that was a hunt. Like, that was her changing her body language and showing me she's got a touch of birdiness. That was a big step, because it was not just her running at will. That's the kind of stuff that is so subtle, but yeah, I filmed it, and I documented it because I was like, man, this is a change. It's also one of the first weekends that we were running the GPS and the bell, and I was starting to figure out what the bell sounded like, because I can really tell after some experience as to what it sounds like when she's working a bird, when she's not working a bird. So those first couple videos, that's all that was figuring out what it sounded like when she worked through the cover. Nothing super impressive by any means, but big time learning thing. Now we move forward, we're into this area where there's these prairie chickens in this wildlife area, reserve area that you can run dogs. You can't hunt it, but so I took her there just to see, I think it's called Buena Vista. This was a first for her to run in these big covers. We didn't find any birds, but it was just, you'll notice her range. She's pretty close. So this is how she ran. This would have been like August, around the 8th, I think. She's not huge. She didn't run real big, but she had some habits. She'd yo-yo a little bit more than I wanted her to. She'd come back and forth to me. She checked in real heavily. I never talked to her. I was okay with it. I let her be. Now this one, I'm not sure. This would have been
Ben, you circle around
in August, I believe. This is a video that we just filmed with our phones because a pigeon at the farm landed down and she found it. We found her pointing on it. So this isn't a planted pigeon. This is a pigeon that was just stuck behind the blinds in the farm, in the barn.
Go ahead, walk past her.
Now, I didn't want her to catch it. It wouldn't have been my preference, which she didn't. Managed, but boy, she showed a bit of caution there. This is a nice little follow-up of stuff she had been doing off of those pigeon launchers, but this was a very different situation. Here's one where I'm walking on my trails. This is still in August.
Sit.
And she's all of a sudden showing me some real point. Now, there was no bird here. But I walked up on that pointed dog from 30 yards, 40 yards maybe. I wouldn't say it was 40, probably 20 to 30 yards. Here I'm training with a buddy of mine who's got a uncle to Máquina, a buddy of mine named Ted. And so Fitz went on point on a bird here. So we circled around and saw if he saw the grouse in the road we circled around to see if she could get on point on it. She didn't. She covered. You'll hear the bell get in at a distance. This is probably later in August. This is at least a week or two later. She still wasn't pointing birds at this point, but she was starting to range a little bit, and you'll hear the bell at a distance. I mean, she's probably out 50, 60, 70 yards at times, but we knew there was a bird there. And so our question was, well, what is she going to do? Now, was it the bird that moved off that drew her to that distance? I'm not sure. But I did this so often with her, just take her in the woods and let her figure stuff out. And it was never frustrating to me, but I could see someone being frustrated by the idea of we're just not finding birds, especially when I went with Ted, because Fitz found 3 or 4 grouse on this trip, at least. He found a brood 3 times. But you'll also see, after just a week or two, the confidence start to build in her from a range standpoint. And I feel like she had found some birds in that time, and it started to click to her to say, I'm going to go in the woods and look for stuff instead of just going for a walk with you and kind of paying attention to me as much or more than anything.
Loggers are working on Sunday.
This was a nice little opportunity for Ted's Fitz to stand and let this other little dog run around and try figuring stuff out.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you'll notice as this episode goes on, I think one of the things that's standing out to me is the expansion of range. If I fast forward another month to right now, she's stretching way out, running 120, 150, 180 at times, and then circling back. And she's pointing birds at 90 yards right now and holding them for us to walk up on. This was just a few weeks ago that this video was filmed. So it's really interesting to see the progression and how quickly it can happen with the opportunities that you give them. This next video is probably into September, early September. And you're going to see there was a woodcock that had flushed. She went in the woods. I think she kind of bumped it a little bit. The woodcock got up, flew over my left shoulder, and landed about 40 yards away. I could see it go down 30 yards maybe. So she was interested in it. I think she had smelled it. So now I actually brought her into that cover in that direction. She relocates that bird. This is the first real time I say, man, we got something done here. And you listen to that bell. So she went in, found the bird, pointed it. I followed her in. Between me and her, we put enough pressure on the bird to flush it. I shoot the cap gun. Now, this is shortly after. This is down the trail, not very long. And I look at my thing because I wanted to see how far. I'm trying to learn how to use this GPS thing. Well, it told me there it was 28, 30 yards and up and to the right. So I had come down and she had pointed and I started walking towards her. Well, here I'm at 14 yards into the woods, so take a right. And so I sneak in on her. Now, this is literally minutes after that last woodcock. And here she is at a distance, pointing solid. It's the first time I would say I had any confidence to the idea of I'm walking in on a pointed dog. Boy, let me tell you how excited I was. I really didn't know what I was doing or what to expect. There she's flagging her tail a little, so I can tell she moves. When she moves, I would stop. There she finds the bird again. So she had smelled the bird, lost the bird, relocated. There she's moving. There she stops. Every time that bell would move, I know she's moving, and I stop, and it's this little game of let her establish. Now, I walk in, and I'm going, man, I don't even know if there's a bird there because I've never seen her this steady on a bird or pointing this hard on a bird. And there goes the bird. Now there's a feeling of accomplishment right there. Now I look back on that and I go, man, she's doing way better than that right now. This was just like I would say probably September 3rd. It's October, I think it's like October 8th or 9th right now. Those are the largest blackberries I've ever found in my life. Just another benefit of this year time of training. Now this one was really interesting. This was about an hour later. She had gone into the woods and pointed, and I walked in, and you could see how her head's swiveling. She's pointing solid, but her head's swiveling. And now I look at that and I go, I would say she's not confident on the point there, which back then, this is only the second good point she's given me, so I have no idea what to expect out of her. So I circled and I got all the way around her. And there's where I went, man, there's got to be something there, the way she's intensely looking in. But boy, look at the confidence in her there versus what it is today. It blows my mind. She relocates a little bit, moves a little bit. There goes the woodcock. So now I'm really flying high going, wow, I got myself a little dog here.
Okay.
It just took that long, and I would be honestly, I would say she probably had moved to this point, September 3rd. I bet you she'd been exposed to 150 or more grouse and woodcock. These are the first ones she really gave me some pretty serious pointing dog vision. Here's the day that I took her to another piece. This is probably around September 6th. And I took her to this piece, and all of a sudden she's pointing stuff. Now, there was no bird here, but I have a feeling there was a grouse that had walked off. We did find some grouse this day that I'm with her, but boy, look at her, and she's just got that high nose, that high tail. She's letting me walk past her. Again, just progress that I thought. And so I wanted to film a lot of this. I didn't find birds on every point like this, but the majority I did, and it started to develop a lot of confidence in me, in as far as having confidence in her. And we didn't find a bird here, so I wanted to include this one because I was told Ben, I said, I want people to really understand what we saw. We saw, there's that little flagging, and then all of a sudden she tightens back up, but no bird came out of this point. But I still looked at it as lesson learned. I was surprised there wasn't a bird, but I got a feeling there was a swamp and an edge that drops off, and I got a feeling there was a grouse in there. It just walked off. Here's one that if you listen real hard, you'll hear. There was a brood or two in here. And just listen to the bell. Because she'll point a bird, then the bird will flush. Then she'll point a bird, and the bird will flush. These were all grouse. There goes the flush. And then the bell. And then she'll point another one, and I'll hear a bird flush. Then she'll point another one. And I ended up hearing it about at least 8 to 10 times. And at one point, she ended up going out about 400 yards. It was just, I couldn't imagine the sensory overload she had when she got into this. But again, could I have shot them? No. Did I even attempt? I mean, it wasn't hunting season yet. But could I have attempted to? I could have probably walked in there and tried to get vision on them. But to me, the value was her just sticking her nose in the middle of a whole bunch of birds and figuring out. Now, I think there was an advantage to the birds in the broods by lots of scent and kind of overwhelming situation. But I also think it was kind of a challenge for her because it was so much, and there were birds that were moving, and she just had a really hard time. You're going to see that she really moved out there, and she got close to 400 at one point. But the thing about it was broods challenged her because she'd go on point on them, and I think lots of birds started to move, and it was just too much for her to stand. And she'd eventually lose it and rush in after them and flush them. I think that's part of it. I just think she's got to learn that the fun is definitely pointing. She doesn't really care for the bird that much when the bird is down. I found that out once I shot a few birds over her. It's not the bird in the mouth that gets her that jacked up. It's the idea of pointing them. And so I think the lesson is learned when she blows them up, that the game's over. And now she's got to go find another one. And so I really believe that as she sees more of this, she's just going to get more and more okay with the idea of find one and stand it. There she's out to 370 yards. So she went from from 50 to 150 to 400, and then she circled back. Now, if I didn't have that GPS, that would have made me really nervous. But I knew where she was. I knew what she was doing. I knew she was chasing birds. And you know what? I just smiled and kind of took it all in. And when she came back, she was damn tired. But that was the value of that GPS. Just took my mind and put it at ease. So I sat there and I waited, and finally she comes back. And you can start to hear the bell a little bit. So she wasn't gone that long, but boy, it would have felt long if I didn't realize that she was the few hundred yards out that she was. This is the following week. This is probably early September, maybe the 11th or 12th. Another week later. This is when we first started the walk, and boy, this is a hard point, right 100 yards from the truck, and I'm thinking, we are going to have a bird here. It looked like a real grousey area along the edge of a bog. I walked in on it, never found a bird. But this is where I want you to see, like, since when you first started seeing this video to now is a time of 3 weeks. Actually, it's be 4 weeks. But look at the difference that the dog has in her confidence and how she handles, and how I'm starting to figure out how to read that a little bit. Now, we had no bird here, but I'm quite certain there was a bird here, and it likely walked off. But this was the start of a day where she pointed, and you're going to see these videos following. She had some really nice bird work on some woodcock. And I started to realize she's getting woodcock figured out, but these grouse are really challenging to her. I would say no doubt in my mind that this was a grouse. And the grouse took her a couple more weeks to figure out how to get pinned to the point where I could walk in and point them, and flush them off of her point. But I was real surprised here. You hear me say, real surprised. Expected a bird for sure. But the other thing I want you to notice is look at the difference in her body language and how she works areas from this point in this video to the beginning, where she really was just kind of running. And I feel like she got to the point where she understood the purpose of her run and reason for why she was doing what she was doing. Here we're back in the thick, and you're going to see she's got a woodcock pin there. I'm walking with 4 labs, so it's an extra thing for me to handle here, but I thought she worked really well in thick foliage. It seemed to hold the birds a little tighter for her. There goes the bird. One of the first times I really could have made a pretty shootable flush. That's about 45 minutes after that last video. And once she got dialed in on birds, boy, she really did a nice job.
Good boy, Blue. Good.
Here we're even taking Blue on these walks and having him sit steady to these flushes, and he's only about 6 or 7 months in this video. Probably 6 months. There's another one down the trail. This one was probably out about 40 to 45 yards, I would guess, when she first pointed. So we walked down the trail, and here she's 17 yards off the trail. So I put those dogs on sit and walked in on it. Woodcock. One of the things I'm
Good
noticing
dog.
watching these videos are probably good for me to watch
Good
is
dog.
in the training season how much more patient I was. You put a gun in my hand now, it's hunting season, and I realize how fast I move in try to get these birds, and it's a reminder I might want to and maybe should slow down a little bit. I think I get in a rush of the grouse not getting away, and it's something that I'll probably have to learn a little bit more of, trust the dog and trust the dog to relocate when needed. But I am noticing that. I also will say that this training, it's a whole lot easier when you don't have to try to get a shot. Which now the woods are opening up a little bit and it's maybe more realistic to be able to. But quite honestly, when it was training season, there were very few birds I saw enough that I could have
Good
got
dog.
a shot off.
Good girl.
Now, when I said sit there, I was saying it to the labs. The labs were with me. And I wanted to make sure that they weren't breaking to that shot. And they weren't. They were back on that trail. But there's two more woodcock that she had handled really nicely. And you'll see where the dogs were when we first started. When she went on point, I walked up from there. So that's probably about 30, 40 yards.
Good
But,
dogs.
but it's, again, I can't say it enough how incredibly fast it seemed to come on once she had started figuring this out.
Good boys, dude.
This next one is a video where she went on a real hard point. I thought, man, this is just bang, bang, bang after those couple woodcock. Those are all in the same cover. Here I went in, and you're going to see the first time I actually looked to have her relocate. Now, we never found the bird, and I think this is another one of those situations where it was a grouse that walked off. But boy, it was just impressive to watch her work. I wanted to include this in this video because it's kind of a long clip. I wanted to include it because I felt like it really showed me starting to believe her and her starting to really show me she kind of knows what she's doing. Now, we didn't find this bird, which makes me think it was grouse. But you're going to see I move her a couple times, and she really believed there was a bird there. There was certainly scent in there. But all of this, I think, is learning opportunity for her. So I'm walking in there going, this is great. This is how it's done. You just walk in front of them and flush the bird. Well, didn't quite work on this one. But man, for her to hold it this way compared to what she was doing a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks before that, it really was, we were on the right track, I knew. Another thing is, the way this cover was, the thickness of this cover, it really shows me, it's because it's starting to open up a little bit now. I think she's relearning how to point these birds as the season goes on. This weekend was a challenge for her, and it's the first weekend that the leaves came down, and I think it will make it easy. I thought it would make it easier. I think it will eventually make it easier for her. I think it made it a lot harder for her because I think there was a lot of different environmental things. The way the scent was held, the other scents in the air. Like, the woods smell like fall. And if I can smell them, I can't imagine what it smells like to a dog right now. But back here, it's kind of humid. It's hot. There's a canopy, like a blanket of leaves. I just think it does such different things from a scenting standpoint. The dog is almost relearning to do it now as the leaves fall down. She finally had this started to get this figured out with this big canopy of leaves, and now she's got to redo it. So the way this dog is holding in this area, there was a bird here. There had to be. There's no way she's not. I just think that it was a grouse. It moved off. It outsmarted us, and it's one of these things where, does that go into her library? Does that go into her memory bank? At this point, I thought, I just got to go move around and move this bird, but we never did quite catch up to it. this video, I think, shows a lot, or tells me a lot about the transition that took place in the way she moves. If you look at this video and you look at the one from 3 weeks before, you got a puppy 3 weeks before running through the woods and occasionally flash pointing at some scent. This one, you got a dog that's really trying. And, you know, not for a second am I going to pretend to say that it's because of training. I think it's genetics. And I'm just giving her a chance to do it. Which, yeah, that's the training part of it. But it's in her. It's just being patient enough to let it come out. And probably the understanding and willingness to get out of the way and not be so involved. So here, I mean, she's relocating on this bird a couple times and we just can't find the bird. Now, over the past couple weeks, I've watched her work running grouse and handle them. And we get to them, and we flush them. And so this is the first time that ever happened, that truly, like, to this degree. And I just didn't know what to do. I just didn't know how to handle it. So I don't know that I would have done it a whole lot differently, but I probably would have trusted that nose to let her keep working. You know, the other thing, too, is the bird could have flown, and now he's gone. So all of a sudden, there was so much bird scent here, and now all of a sudden it's gone, and I didn't hear it flush. And so it was a long, boring clip for you to watch, but at the same time, that's what it took. It took a bunch of those, and then it took a bunch of them that we found success and moved a bird, and very much learning in front of you, you know, live opportunities to learn, both for me and her, which is why I wanted to share those. Here's a video that another week later. This is around September 11th, so that was probably around September 3rd. I was a week ahead. There was a grouse in the road. I saw it. I backed up, I let her out, and I went, now I'm going to watch her work on a bird, a grouse, because I know there's one there. I took her out, that's why there's no bell. I just literally set her down and let her go, and there's what I saw. This is the week before the opener. And there they flushed. It was 3 of them. Now there's a smile on my face as big as you're ever going to see, because I went, my dog points grouse. Did I know she would? Of course. But did I see it? No. And this time I saw it. And so what was eye-opening there was how she put a few things together. She went past the cone, and it was enough scent to stop her, but she wasn't downwind of the birds. She had moved through that scent cone. Well, then she adjusted herself, and she moved back. And when she moved back into the cone, it was too much for those birds, and they flushed. So that was something I really put in my mind, because she was getting away with that with Woodcock. She was getting into the area of the cone, going past the bird, making an adjustment, coming back and pointing at Woodcock, and the Woodcock wouldn't flush, and I'd walk in and flush it. This is the first time I got to see her do this on a grouse. Point it, come back, bump it, and there she flushed a grouse. It ran across in front. She had pointed that for a split second. I heard the bird moving in front of her. She flushed it, chased it across the road. I said, hell, that's all right. She started to find grouse a lot more seriously. Here's how I start just about every time I take her, whether we're hunting or training. I walk her in and I just whoa her. No birds, no nothing. Just put her on stand. It helps me understand that my collar is working and for notifications, but I also think it puts her mind in the right place of focus prior to us going into the woods.
Whoa.
So again, I don't whoa her around any birds. She's not been formally whoa trained by any means, but I am introducing it to her to understand the concept of stop and wait.
Whoa.
Again, this is our last week prior to the hunting season starting, so we're just scouting some areas. And that's just how I cut her loose on every time we go to hunt. Here we went into a trail. She went on point, probably about 30, 40 yards in front of me. Real overgrown trail. I walked up. Here she is. Nice solid point. Beautifully done. And I'm starting to really get confident in my dog. That noise you hear is Spry heeling next to me. That's her tail going. She's allowing me to walk right past her.
Yeah.
You see her foot go down there. She gets a little... There's the woodcock. Went up over the top of us. She gets a little bit nervous when I get past her.
Good dog.
What's really interesting about her is she'll go on point and hold it very, very steady until we get to her. Once we get to her, she wants to adjust. She wants to make that final adjustment. But she's not doing it before we get there, and so I'm fine with it. Here's this is another pointed grouse here. This is really exciting to me. I thought the dog went on point on the right side of the trail here. The grouse flushed in between me and her. So she had pointed those birds from down at the bottom of this ridge, about 50 yards away, 40 to 50 yards away. I came up the hill, thought the dog was on the right side of the ridge. At this point, I'm a few weeks into using my GPS and trying to not rely on it. So I'm really trying to pay better attention to the bell. This is later that morning. She went on point on this open trail in this kind of more mature woods. I stopped and watched, and this was really nice work. There was a bird there. She pointed initial scent. She relocated. She slows down to a point. I move in. She relocates one more time. Points. I walk in. And between her and I, a grouse flushed. So this is where I was starting to realize what I saw in that video on the road where she ran through the scent cone, pointed, realized she didn't have the bird, decided she was going to move. And for a while there, the grouse wouldn't allow that to happen. And she was bumping them. Now all of a sudden she started to decide I can put a little bit but not a ton of pressure on. And she's starting to get to the point where she's getting body scent on these birds and pointing them, and I'm able to walk in and flush them. This is a huge, huge step for her because it's exactly what she did with grouse or with woodcock, and now she started doing it with grouse. Here's a pair of grouse in here. Or actually, I think there's 3 grouse in here. This is the following day. We went for a walk. She got on a point in this middle area, about quite a ways, 50 plus yards away from me, and I walked in on it. And you'll hear the birds. I never saw them, but you'll hear the birds flush. There was one grouse. There's a second grouse. And then there'll be a third. So slowly but surely, she's starting to get these points on grouse. It followed the same exact path as what happened with the woodcock. It went from flushing, recognizing the scent and flushing. She'd get birdie and flush them, to flash pointing them, to pointing them a little bit more solid and letting me start to come in and then allow me to walk in and flush. And the grouse was just, it took a few more weeks. That's all. My hope with this episode is that it brings some value to you to understand, like, the training didn't stop. The training just changed. And that went to let her go figure this out on her own, and you figure it out with her. You figure out how to read it based on her actions. I'm filming this on the 10th of October. So it's 4 weeks later. And 4 weeks later is a completely different game because we hunted and we shot some birds over her. And I've got some stories to share on it. And Ben's going to be starting to carry the camera because the camera wouldn't have brought much value. I wore a GoPro. We got a little bit out of that. More missing than anything. I miss a lot more than I hit. But the GoPro isn't the answer. It's going to be part of the equation for us, but Ben's going to have to follow me around with the camera, which he's going to do. It just wouldn't have worked when the woods was so thick. We wouldn't have gotten anything of much value. We're doing our best to make this series as realistic as possible. I want to share everything. And I want to share it from my perspective, which is not knowing that much, learning a lot. So that's this episode. It's really the start of the transitional training, but very much training. And then we're going to start being able to share with you some of the transitional training to the hunt and actually doing some hunting.